In this recording, we're going to take a look at what we can do with the RESTCONF Admin API that the Curity Identity Server exposes. I have a set of API calls here in Postman, although these can be executed from pretty much anywhere, curl or any other API tool. I'm going to use my system here on localhost and port 6749, which is the default admin port. You can see here the admin API RESTCONF is the URI, base URI that we use. And to get the data here and only the config data, we can execute this, and this gives us the entire configuration of my system here in the response. Now this is obviously a lot of data. I can subtract some of the response payload here, and you can see that there's a couple of main sections of the full configuration here: environments, profiles, facilities, processing, and so forth. We can limit the query to get only, for example, the environments data. So by adding on to the URI here, the base environments section, and as well as the environment, now we get a subpart of the full configuration. So now we get the URL path for the base URL path, and the ports that are configured for the admin service, as well as the listening ports for the service role. And we can see what endpoints are available. We can also do the same for the profiles part, where we get the profiles profile, and here I'm showcasing the use of fields, so I can get the ID and type fields only from the profile. We can see here that there are two profiles configured: the authentication service and the token service. There's a lot more data to this, but since I specify what fields specifically I want, I'm only getting the ID and the type field back from this query. So we can now take the authentication service part. You can see here that we're still querying the base profile, but we're saying that we want to get the base profile that is the authentication service. So essentially excluding, in this case, the token service information. With this information, we now get all the aspects of the authentication service. So this would include authentication actions. I have a debug one here. The different authenticators that are configured. I have a CAPTCHA, Facebook, HTML authenticator, for example. So if we take the HTML authenticator specifically, we can see here some information about it. It has a previous authenticator, etc. But let's limit our query here to only the HTML authenticator. So this query will give us only the data for the HTML1 authenticator, or the HTML authenticator with the ID HTML1. Now, what's different here is I actually do not pass the content type header that gives me JSON. This is JSON. And if I exclude the content type, it defaults to XML. So I just wanted to showcase that you can actually get the data in different formats. So this is the HTML authenticator in XML format. Here we can see that the authentication actions attached to this HTML authenticator is debug. And what we can now do is we can change this. If I copy that entire payload and paste it in here, we can do a put request to the same URL essentially. And what we could do here is, for example, change this. So if we go into the UI, look at my HTML authenticator, can see here that the prerequisite is a CAPTCHA, and there's an action, debug action attached to it that happens after the authentication. So in order to change this, with the RESTCONF, we can remove the prerequisite. We can also remove the debug action. So let's remove both of those and send this payload. We now get a 204 back, no content back from the request, but it executed successfully. If I now refresh this in the UI, we can see that the CAPTCHA and the debug action are no longer attached to this HTML form authenticator. Obviously, we can run the request here to see that they are also gone. So it's both possible to get information out of the RESTCONF API as well as update and inject new configurations. Moving on to the token service, same principle here as for the authentication service. It's just that the name is token service instead. Remember, we got the ID from the profiles, and then we have an OAuth service. It's the type of it. So we pass in token service and OAuth service. And here we get all of the information of the token service, which includes all the configured scopes and what claims those scopes have assigned to them. We also get down to the configured clients. I have one called www here with the redirect URIs that are configured and so forth, and what authenticators they are configured to have, for example. So why don't we get the www client specifically? So narrowing down sort of the search or the query of the RESTCONF API, we get this as JSON here. If we look at this specific client in the UI, you can see here that it has a set of redirect URIs configured. So if we now switch back to Postman, we can copy the payload from the client, and then we'll choose the JSON data type here, paste the payload in, and if we now remove this localhost callback URI, for example, and send that, we get a 204 with no content back. But if we go back into the UI here, refresh my client, we can see that that specific callback URI is removed from the client. So that's an example of how you can modify a client using the RESTCONF API. Now I'm going to switch to scopes here in the UI. One thing that's interesting to look at here, and that's available in the UI everywhere, essentially, is the RESTCONF API builder. So you have a useful tool that can be used to build up a curl query string, essentially, that can be executed to invoke a call to the RESTCONF API. So here I can build it up, and you can copy the command, move to the terminal and execute that curl command. And in this case, we were on the scopes section of the UI, so I did a get command, so we can get all of the scopes in JSON format here that are configured in this specific system. We can also use the API builder to generate a put command for us in order to add or change a configuration within the system. So this right now will generate a put command that will just put the same configuration that's already in place. But we can copy this into an editor. I'm going to copy one of the current scopes, and we'll add that as a new one, but we're going to change the ID. So my demo scope here, can add a better description. You can keep the address claim just as an example, but also add the email claim to this, for example. So now we've built up a whole new configuration that we can copy and execute in a terminal here, since it's a curl command. So you can see that we got, when it's executed, we get a 204 with no content back, but it has executed successfully. And within the UI, under scopes, we can now refresh, and we have the new demo scope in here. If we click it, we can see that it also contains the claims that we configured for it. So this is one way that RESTCONF can be used through the execution of a curl command, and we used the built-in API builder capability within the UI. Hopefully this gave you some ideas on how to leverage the RESTCONF API for configuration, both reviewing the configuration as well as updating and changing it. Let us know if you have any feedback or comments. info@curity.io. Thanks for watching.